It's good to see people coming out to hear about this. I was thinking, you know, back in, say, 100 years ago, if this sort of a program was being put on in Nambour, you'd get 400 or 500 people here. The problem tonight, the problem today is really television, and it's hard to get people out of their homes. And I really want to congratulate you for coming out of the comfort of your homes all these nights to hear about health. Today I had to go to a luncheon with an architect and some businessmen down in Brisbane, and you know, they were drinking, and the more they drank, the more they made fun of what I do. So I just threw a few back at them. Anyway, when I was saying goodbye to them, you know, one after the other shook my hand and said, "Well, if I ever want to know anything about health, I'll call you, but I'll probably never call you." Yeah. And I thought, well, that's how a lot of people are today. And I thought, you know, it's pretty sad because these people have got, they've got health problems. It was quite obvious they had health problems, and they're just drinking so they won't realise what they've got wrong with them. And you know, it's good to see people who are interested to know. There needs to be, as I said at the beginning of this week, there needs to be a health revolution. And yet with any revolution, it starts at the grassroots level where people start standing up and saying, we've got to do something. We need to do something in the schools. We need to get the health message into the schools so that children today can be educated on how to eat and what junk food does to them, fast food and Coke and so on. With the school teachers that come to Living Valley Springs and they tell us that they see what a lot of kids eat today. And there's a lot of kids come to school without any breakfast. And then at play lunch they just have junk. They have Coke and they have pastries and just a lot of other bad stuff, a lot of refined sugars and carbohydrates. And because the body is so incredibly strong and it's made by design to win, there's compensation going on all the time. But eventually it just can't compensate anymore. And so these kids get to 30 or 40 and they've got major health problems, including cancer. And we're seeing a lot of people develop cancer at a young age today. In fact, when I was young, I remember the big C. It was the big C. It was a pretty rare thing, and nobody young got it. But today we're seeing even teenagers developing cancer, and it's the next generation. So the young people that are eating junk today, by the time they have children, it's their children who are actually going to suffer, because we're genetic. We pass on damage. It's been proven now in the Australian National University in Canberra that if I was to break a leg at the age of, say, 18, and then in my 20s I father a child, the record of that broken leg shows up in my child's genes. There is a traceable record of that broken leg, and it's been proven now. So if he was to break the same leg and then he had a child, we would start to see a leg problem in the third generation. So if we're eating a lot of junk food and damaging our livers and wrecking our blood and everything else, and then we start fathering children, we're creating a major problem for the future. And that's what's happened. And that's why there needs to be a revolution. And you people are the ones who can do it. Everybody can have an influence on somebody. And I don't think we need to go and bash people over the head and start picking on people because they drink coffee and eat sugar and so on. But if we lead by example and show people that we can be healthy and fit and we can really enjoy life and we can be very happy, and there is a good diet and there is a good lifestyle program that produces wellness and longevity, then people will become interested. And I think there's an awareness happening today, isn't there? You know, you people are aware or you wouldn't be here tonight. Why am I holding this? I haven't got anything up there. Yeah. So I'm just going to talk to you tonight. But tonight I wanted to talk to you about food because it's the big thing. When people talk about health, they usually think of food, although exercise and water and sunlight and temperance, also the emotional health, all these other areas are very important. But food is the one that we think of most because what we eat is what we are. And what does the body need first up in the morning? What's the greatest need when you get out of bed? You got it. The first greatest need of the body is hydration. And don't ever forget that. And, you know, if you start hydrating first thing in the morning, if you haven't been doing it, you'll notice the difference within 2 days in how you feel during the day. And it's not just one glass of water. I really recommend that on rising, you really should have 2 or 3 or even 4. I know people that have a full litre on rising. I usually have 3 big mugs of water on rising, and I put lemon juice in it. And I also put in a spoon of vitamin C powder. And I also occasionally will use a good friendly bacteria like lactobacillus. Lactobacillus is a tremendous bacteria that's produced, it's a non-dairy product, and it's lactobacillus and bifidus, which are the main 2 bacteria for the large and the small bowel. But every now and then I'll do a course of that just to make sure I'm keeping the good bacteria in the colon. And I'll put that in my first cup of water, drink that down. That's the lemon juice, the water, the vitamin C and the lactobacillus bifidus, and then I'll have 2 more glasses of water to wash it through. That's a good way to start the day. But then breakfast, what's the greatest need of the body for breakfast? Protein? Protein. Well, it's probably a competition between glucose and protein. The body does need glucose, and we don't need to go eating refined sugar to get our glucose. You'll get glucose from just about anything, including all your fruits. Particularly your fruits are high in glucose. So we do need glucose just to get that the sugar level up in the body, because if you've been in bed, well, say you may have had dinner finished by 7 p.m. the night before, so you've had no blood sugar really for 12 hours by the time you're getting to have breakfast, maybe 13 hours. So you need to bring up the blood sugar levels. And the best way to do that is some good natural form of glucose, which would be found in fruit. Now, it's not a good thing to be having fruit juices necessarily all the time, because fruit juices, they're concentrated. And the study done by Hal Huggins in Colorado, he was a professor, a dentist originally, but then got into a lot of nutritional studies. He found that studying people's blood chemistries, he couldn't get their blood chemistries right while they were still having orange juice every morning. And he was talking about commercial orange juice, which was what a lot of people have in America. It's a big thing. Have your big glass of orange juice in the morning, and companies deliver the commercially processed orange juice. It's not good, because in the process of making that orange juice, it changes. It's squeezed, and then it's kept for a period of time, and it loses some of its enzymes, and some of its vitamins change. And he just couldn't get the blood chemistry right while they were having that every day. Once he stopped them having that orange juice, their blood chemistry came good fairly quickly. So you don't need to be having orange juice. Really, we really should be having water. Juices are very good if you're going to do a cleanse. And if you're going to have a juice in the morning, you want to have it about 20 minutes to half an hour before you have breakfast. And that will give you glucose, but I would recommend rather than fruit juices, you're better off with vegetable juices, because vegetable juices are much higher in minerals, and I'm talking about things like carrot and the greens, carrot and greens, and beetroot and so on. There is a problem with those too, because carrot and beetroot are extremely high in sugar. It's natural sugar, but if you've got a problem with the pancreas, or you're trying to deal with a health problem, you'll find that, that may be too much sugar for you in one go, too much of a boost. So you're better off not to have too many juices. And you're better off just getting into the breakfast. And in that breakfast, protein is incredibly important. Now, one of the things that we see today with a lot of people who come to Living Valley Springs who are, in their own mind, health reformers. You know, they believe that they're doing it right because they don't eat meat and they don't eat refined sugar and they probably don't eat white bread. So they think they've got it all together and they come, but they're sick and they don't know why. They've got no energy, suffering from severe fatigue. They've usually got digestive problems and sometimes they're actually overweight and sometimes they're really underweight. It depends on their metabolism, but we start to analyse their diet and we find that they're basically on fruit and vegetables and carbohydrates, right? Grains. Fruits, vegetables and grains. So they're having a lot of rice, they're having a lot of spaghetti and pasta foods, and they'd be having wholemeal bread and so on, but there's not much protein in any of that. So over a period of time, thinking that they're doing really well, they've actually really destroyed their health. And that's what happened in England when the mad cow disease hit, when 40% of England became vegetarian overnight and they didn't know how to do it, and they went on fruit and vegetables and grains. Now, fruit, vegetable, grain diet will ultimately put you in the grave at a younger age. It's not enough. There's not enough protein there. Right? So where are we going to get our protein from? Well, legumes contain some protein. Not a real lot, but the combination of a legume and a grain is a fairly good complete protein. Now, the Chinese, you find that they use rice. And rice is probably the best of all the grains because it doesn't contain the gluten and it doesn't seem to create a lot of allergy problems. But if you're going to have rice, look at what the Indians do. They have lentils with their rice. Now, lentils on their own only contain a very small amount of protein, but when you combine that with rice, you get a higher level of protein because the lentils don't have the complete amino acid profile, and neither does the rice. But when you put them together, they complement each other. What do they do in Lebanon? The vegetarians in Lebanon, and a lot of Lebanese food is vegetarian. They have chickpeas and sesame seeds, and they have their bread. They'll have their wholemeal bread. Has anyone ever been to a Lebanese restaurant? You know, you get your hummus and your baba ganoush. Now these are made from using chickpeas and sesame seeds and eggplant and so on, but there's usually sesame and chickpea together and bread will make a complete protein. So they've worked that out. But how much protein do we need? Well, the thing is that a number of studies have come out on the body's need for protein, and I'm finding that most people on a vegetarian diet are not getting anywhere near the requirement of protein we need to maintain good health. And I'll go into the statistics in a minute, but what happens if we don't get enough protein is that we start to create major imbalances in the body, and the body has to start compensating. One of the first things that will happen is that the body will have to start getting rid of its iron quickly. So you'll get an iron deficiency because iron without enough protein becomes a free radical, and a very serious free radical. You can think of iron as a tiger. The iron molecule is a tiger. It will rip through the cell and it will create serious damage, and it can even create cancer. And iron excess in America now is registered as one of the main causes of cancer in men. Iron excess, too much iron. And why? Because they're eating a lot of meat, and maybe, women lose blood every month generally, but I suppose men used to fight and hurt themselves when they're working out in the the workshop and so on. And maybe men were supposed to bleed a little bit more than they do. But in this day and age, men don't bleed as much as they used to. There used to be a lot more wounds and wars and things like that. I don't know, maybe that's the case. But there's a big problem with excessive iron in America. Now, the thing is that if you've got iron coming into your body, you need a cage to put the tiger inside. That cage is made out of protein, pure protein. It's called ferritin, and when you have enough protein, the iron can be encapsulated in the ferritin, and then you need a handler to get the tiger, to get the tiger out of the cage so it can do its job. And the handler is actually a copper protein enzyme. So protein is used again in the work of the handler to get that tiger out of the cage to do what it's got to do. And so if we don't have enough protein, the iron will do a lot of damage, so the body will, on a low protein diet, pee out the iron as quick as it can. And so we see people on a low protein diet get iron deficiency, right? Because it's not because they're necessarily not getting enough iron in their diet, it's just they haven't got enough protein to protect them from the iron and to deal with the iron. So the way to get the iron level back up again is not necessarily taking iron. And to go and get things like iron injections or to take iron supplements, it may alleviate the symptoms for a period of time, but it will usually cause free radical damage. Right? What we need to do is get the protein up. Now, another source of protein is nuts, and another source is seeds, but we can have too many of them too. So we need to be careful. We can have a balance of almonds. Almonds are probably the king of all nuts, and it's good to maybe have 10, 12 almonds a day. You can have a few macadamia nuts, but not too many. You can have some cashews, and seeds like sunflower seeds are quite good too. But we don't want to have too many of them. If you're going to have a lot of nuts, you need to soak them overnight, because nuts also contain enzyme inhibitors. Now, enzyme inhibitors are things that occur in nature, and enzyme inhibitors are there to protect the nut or the legume or the seed for a period of time. Like, for example, soybeans are full of enzyme inhibitors. Now, a soybean, if it goes to full maturity on the vine, develops enzyme inhibitors that protect it in storage. And you can keep soybeans for 100 years and the rats won't eat them and they won't break down or decay because they've got a natural preservative. Now, if you eat them with that natural preservative, it inhibits your own production of protease enzymes, and it messes up your own ability to break down and assimilate food. So soybeans can be very dangerous. It's hard to get that enzyme inhibitor out of the soybean. Soaking them overnight doesn't do it. They need to be cultured, like John was saying before. You need to culture them with a friendly bacteria. And soybeans traditionally come from Asia, from Japan and China, and if you look back in history, they never ate soybeans until they'd cultured them and turned them into with a friendly bacteria. They used aspergillus, but they would culture them for a period of weeks or months, put them into a wooden barrel and let the enzyme inhibitors be broken down. People who are eating a lot of soybean, you'll find that ultimately their pancreas is unable to produce the protease enzymes that it needs to aid in digestion. And protease enzymes now also are very cancer preventative. Right now, when we produce bicarbonates from the pancreas, we also produce protease enzymes at the same time. And if we inhibit protease enzymes or bicarbonates, we actually stop both of them being produced. Right? If you stop one, you stop them both. And we get into digestive problems. So now nuts contain some inhibitors, but your body can usually deal with them a small amount. But if you're going to eat a lot of nuts, soak them overnight and you'll find you'll get rid of it that way. Lentils you can soak overnight, you usually get rid of them, and chickpeas the same. Chickpeas are quite a good, probably the king of all the legumes I would call chickpeas. Or garbanzo beans, that's another name they're called in America. Black-eyed peas, red beans, kidney beans, these are all good, but they must be soaked overnight. But soybeans, you won't get rid of the inhibitors overnight. You've got to do a lot more to them. So we really steer away from soybeans because of the potential digestive problems that they can create. Now, another great source of protein, and I think probably the best source of protein on the planet, is your organic egg. The organic egg has got a complete protein, and it's got sulfur, it's got lecithin, it's got tremendously good essential fatty acids, and it's really a complete food. Probably the only thing missing in it is vitamin C. So you only get about 6 grams of protein a day in an egg though. How much protein do we need in a day? Well, in Poland, one of the great scientists of the world, it was quite an old man in Poland who was a clinical nutritionist, who'd been a doctor, he'd been studying longevity for years, and he was working out what's the balance of protein, carbohydrate and fat in the diet to produce longevity and wellness. And he came up with a figure that he said you take your height in centimetres and subtract 100, and that will give you the amount of protein you need every day. So I'm about 177 centimetres, so I take off 100, that leaves 77 grams a day of protein that I need to maintain good health. Now, another study that I've seen from another person who was studying wellness and longevity, who was also quite renowned for his work, he said you take your weight and you just take your weight in kilograms and convert that to grams, and that's the amount. Now, I weigh 62 kilograms. It's pretty light, isn't it? Anyway, I'm 62 kilograms. That means that I need 62 grams of protein per day. So one scientist says 62, the other one says 77. So I work out that somewhere between those two, but I don't want to get less than 62. But somewhere between 62 and 77 grams of protein is my daily requirement of protein per day. Now, what am I going to get in my diet? If I have 2 eggs every day, I'll get about 12 grams out of that. If I have a cup full of legumes and a cup full of grain, I'll probably get another 10 to 12 grams out of that, say 12. So that's going to give me 24 grams. And then, so I have a few nuts, say the equivalent to about half a cup of nuts, I'll get about another 10 grams. I'm going to pick a little bit of protein up out of my vegetables and some out of my fruit and maybe some seeds I might eat. I'm going to be struggling to get up to my 62 grams. So you can see the problem that vegetarians have. Whereas the meat eaters, they're going to get 45 grams in one chicken breast. You see, or in a lamb chop, they're going to get about 30 grams in a lamb chop. But the thing is that we're concerned about meat today because the disease in the animal kingdom is so much on the increase. And the farming techniques that are used with the animals are not good. And we're seeing the processing of the meats is a problem as well. So we're seeing a trend away from eating meat and toward vegetarianism, but you've got to be careful how you do it. And we're really very careful with our guests who come to Living Valley Springs now who have been eating meat all their life. We don't make them, well, we don't recommend them to jump straight into a vegetarian diet, or they might do what the English people did and go on fruit, vegetables and grains because it's easy. It's easy to eat pasta and bread and cakes and biscuits and things like that, but it takes a bit of work to make good vegetarian food. It means you've got to soak your legumes every night, you've got to work out your balance, and if you're going to be eating a lot of nuts, you need to soak them overnight too. So there's a fair bit of work involved. You've got to make sure you're getting your good organic eggs and so on. We also now recommend, if you can get good organic cultured dairy products like yogurt, yogurt's quite high in protein. And there's some good biodynamic organic yogurts on the market. Sheep's yogurt is one that comes in a glass jar that we serve at Living Valley Springs, and we find that's very creamy and it's got friendly bacteria and it's a tremendous source of essential fatty acids and it's very high in protein. Some of the other sources of protein would include, if you can get organic cream, particularly if you can find it from the A2 cows. Now the A2 cows were the cows, the original Jersey cows, before they did a lot of hybriding. And they found that people who can get dairy products from the A2 Jersey cows don't have any allergy problems. Most of the allergy problems with dairy products today are because of the farming. It's the techniques they've been using, the interbreeding and the hybriding and so on. And they've changed the system. And then there's the processing of the milk, and they standardise the milk by adding things and taking away things. And then they pasteurise it, they homogenise it. Do you remember when, some of you that would be my age, when we were little, you get the bottles of milk delivered every morning and there'd be a big thing of cream in the top. You never see that today. Because now they break that cream up into tiny molecules by the process of homogenisation, and it stays in suspension. And those little molecules of fat actually get into the system a lot quicker than they should. And so that causes an allergic response, an immune response. And so we find that people drinking a lot of homogenised milk will often develop autoimmune diseases, particularly related to the pancreas. So if you're going to have dairy products, you need to find a good, organic, original source of it. And some of the other dairy products that are very high in protein would include feta and brie. If you can get organic biodynamic brie, now you can get that from the natural food store here in Forest Glen. It's a biodynamic brie. Tim Boone is the brand name, and there's Camembert as well. Now some of these are actually good forms of cultured dairy. I wouldn't recommend hard ripened cheese. You find hard ripened cheese, although it is high in protein, it's a very difficult fat to digest because of the ripening process, and it will clog up the arteries and it will clog up the colon. Now, in a number of nutritional courses that I've done overseas in America, I remember one guy got up there, and he was one of the world's leading clinical nutritionists, and he absolutely condemned ripened hard cheeses. And he went through on the board all the science behind it. And then, about an hour later, he's telling us how much we should eat the soft white cheeses, the cultured cheeses like brie, camembert, feta, ricotta and cottage cheese. And a number of people put up their hand and they said, but you just told us an hour ago not to eat cheese, that it's really bad. And he said, well, there's cheese and there's cheese. And he went right through the biology, really, the science behind both cheeses. And he showed how one clogs up the system and the other one unclogs the system. And it's true. Your cultured soft cheeses will unclog the system. Things like the cottage, the brie, the camembert, and so on. And today, I think they're essential on a vegetarian diet because we've all been exposed to a lot of chemicals. 300,000 chemicals on this planet that did not exist in the year 1900, and most of them are fat-soluble. And the fat-soluble poisons need a higher level of protein for the body to deal with them and eliminate them. The protein is the first thing that actually encapsulates these fat-soluble poisons. Then the fat molecule comes and actually carries it out of the body. So when you look at some of these soft cheeses, they're tremendous in dealing with the mercury problem. If you've got a lot of fillings in your teeth, then you'll find that brie, camembert and feta and so on actually play a great role in protecting you from the mercury and other fat-soluble neurotoxins that might have a bad effect on the brain and the central nervous system. And so that's why we recommend them. We didn't, years ago, we were pushing the vegan thing, like this is 10 years ago, but we found now that most people who go on that, in our own experience that we've monitored and followed them, we find that most people don't do too well, mainly because of the exposure to the fat-soluble chemicals. So there's another thing with protein is you'll find that in most of the countries where they've been there for thousands of years, they culture their protein foods. When I was in India, I found that the Indians often have bowls of legumes, whether they be beans or peas or lentils, soaking in water overnight, and they have bowls of rice soaking overnight. And they let the water, they rinse them the first morning, but then they soak them for 2 or 3 days until the water goes fizzy. And then they put it all into a blender and they blend it all up into a creamy substance, and then they pour that onto a hot plate and they make a big pancake, or they pour it into like an egg poaching container and they poach them, and they're called idlis, and idlis are very good for the bowel because they're a cultured food. the fizzy water has actually developed Acidophilus bifidus and about 12 other friendly bacteria. And it breaks down the protein. So these foods that they make, like their pancakes, they wrap up potato curry and things in these pancakes. The protein has been broken down by the culturing process. The same with the yogurt. Now, a lot of people can't have milk, and I think milk's only meant for babies anyway. But you find in the Hunzaland, they don't eat milk. They don't have milk after the age of 10, but they continue to eat yogurt and cultured dairy products until they're 110. You see even the old people still having that. And you find that the races that continued on their cultured dairy products and their eggs and a good balanced diet with plenty of vegetables primarily and then fruit, you find that they've got the longevity, the 100, 110 or even older. And so we can often get onto what we think's a good cleansing diet that's really, well, I'm eating lots of fruit, I'm eating lots of veggies, I'm having a lot of water, and I just have organic spaghetti and so on. But we may not be providing for ourselves enough protein. And you need to be careful of that. It's so vitally important. And especially if you've got deficiencies in iron or vitamin B12, look at your protein first. That might be the problem. Now, the other thing, the next greatest need, I suppose, we look at is the fats, the essential fatty acids. Pritikin came along years ago and he said no fats. Then he ended up dying from leukemia, or they say he committed suicide because he got leukemia. But we see that a lot of people who follow the Pritikin diet develop nerve problems within 20 years, neurological diseases. Now, we find that all neurological diseases, in my own experience, respond to a high-fat diet. You find that where you've got neurological diseases, there's usually a fat-soluble neurotoxin lodged in the central nervous system. And in most cases today, it's mercury, but it can be other things. And if the people who've got those problems, things like we talked about the other night, multiple sclerosis, epilepsy, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and so on, if they're on a low-fat diet that's got low protein, you'll find that their symptoms will exacerbate. They'll get a lot worse. If you can get eggs and some of those cultured dairy products into them, you'll get an improvement straight away. And with people with those neurological diseases, I even get them onto butter, because we can get good organic butter now. It's available around here, organically processed butter, and you find that you get a response straight away because it starts to pull the neurotoxins out of the central nervous system. So fats, how much fat do we need? Well, according to the nutritionist, the one in Poland, he says you take the protein amount and you times 2.5. So he's saying the minimal amount of fat, say for me, for example, is up around 200 grams a day. That's not a real lot of fat, but you get a fair bit in an egg, and if you're having avocados, you'll get a bit. Olive oil is a really good fat as well. There's good fats and there's bad fats. You need to keep away from the bad fats. The things like your margarine, which I mentioned the other night, a very bad fat. Processed for using rancid oils. If you knew how that stuff's made, you'd never go near it. It's reacted with nickel at 300 degrees Fahrenheit to solidify the oils. Also, your refined cooking oils that you see on the shelf there, like B-cell and all these other refined cooking oils, they're no good. Oils need to be in a glass, dark bottle and kept away from light and air as much as possible. Olive oil is probably your best one, but once you heat it up too much, it becomes rancid as well. So you want to have your olive oil on your salad, and you need to have your eggs, instead of cooking them till they're hard, you need those yolks to be still nice and runny and soft so that you're getting the fats that still contain the enzymes to process it properly without destroying it. People say, well, what about the salmonella? We've got an immune system. You find most eggs that are organically grown won't have any salmonella anyway. And I'll tell you, I went to India some years ago, and when I was over there, I got amoebic dysentery. And when I came back, I was as skinny as a stick, and I just couldn't get well. I was down to about 49 kilograms, and a month went by, and I just couldn't pick up. And so then I decided to have 4 organic raw eggs every day. And I beat them up in grape juice. I had 2 in the morning and 2 in the night with the rest of my food. And it picked me up very, very quickly. And I did that for a month. And within a month, I was back to my normal weight and I felt tremendous. So then I went along to the doctor and I got a blood test and a stool test to make sure the amoebas were gone and just to check everything over. And I told him I'd been having 4 raw eggs every day, and he just said, "Oh, that is so crazy. Your bowels will be just full of salmonella." And so he did a stool test. So when I came back, he was quite amazed. He said, "I don't know what sort of eggs you've been eating, but there's absolutely 0 salmonella in the stools." You see, there may have been a little bit in the egg, but you've got an immune system that will just immediately knock it out. Don't underestimate the power of the immune system. I've heard people talking about things like prions. Has anyone heard of prions? And people are saying you've got to wear gloves when you go shopping because you might pick up a bacteria, and you've got to be careful if you're getting a sandwich from a shop where they might prepare meat for somebody else and you might pick up a prion from that. We've got a most powerful immune system, and with the average exposure to these sort of things, our body will knock that out straight away. You know, otherwise you'd have people with mad cow disease all over the world, and you'd have people with all sorts of other diseases. We've got this incredible, powerful immune system that is there ready to fight off these things, so we can tolerate